Imagine powering on your computer and instead of choosing one Linux distribution and living with its strengths and weaknesses, you unlock a system where Arch, Debian, Ubuntu, Fedora, Gentoo, Void, and more can all coexist and cooperate as if they were parts of a single operating system. That idea sounds almost impossible if you've spent years in the Linux world, because traditionally a distribution defines everything. The package manager, the libraries, the init system, the release cycle, and even the philosophy of how software should be built and delivered. Yet this is exactly what Bedrock Linux sets out to achieve. Bedrock Linux is not just another distro in the long list of Linux flavors. It is a radically different approach to how a Linux system can be structured, managed, and experienced. To understand Bedrock Linux, you have to momentarily forget the idea that an operating system must be a single, unified distribution. Instead, Bedrock invites you to think of Linux as a collection of interchangeable components drawn from many distributions, each used where it shines the most. At its core, Bedrock Linux is a meta-distribution. It doesn't aim to replace existing distributions with yet another set of defaults. Instead, it creates a thin layer that allows multiple Linux distributions, called strata, to live side by side on the same system. These strata share the same kernel, the same hardware, and often the same file system hierarchy, but they maintain their own userlands. Each stratum can use its native package manager, libraries, and tools, all while interacting with the rest of the system in a surprisingly seamless way. The result is a Linux environment where you might install bleeding-edge development tools from Arch, rock-solid servers and libraries from Debian, user-friendly desktop applications from Ubuntu, and highly optimized builds from Gentoo, all on one machine, all working together. To appreciate why Bedrock Linux exists, it helps to think about the compromises Linux users constantly make. Every distribution has trade-offs. Arch Linux offers cutting-edge packages and simplicity, but demands constant attention and manual configuration. Debian provides legendary stability but often lags behind in software versions. Ubuntu balances usability and support, but may include design decisions some users dislike. Fedora pushes innovation but has a rapid release cycle that can feel disruptive. Gentoo allows deep customization and optimization at the cost of time and complexity. Normally, choosing one distro means accepting its weaknesses to enjoy its strengths. Bedrock Linux challenges that assumption by asking a simple question: why choose it all? The philosophy behind Bedrock Linux is built on the idea that Linux distributions are largely collections of policies and package repositories layered on top of the same Linux kernel. If the kernel can run software from many different sources, why should a user be forced into a single ecosystem? Bedrock's answer is to decouple the userland from the idea of a monolithic distribution. Instead of one root file system tied to one package manager, Bedrock creates a shared root where binaries, libraries, and configurations from different distributions can coexist without clashing. This is achieved through a combination of clever file system layouts, symbolic links, bind mounts, namespace, and wrapper tools that redirect commands to the appropriate stratum. When you install Bedrock Linux, you typically start from an existing distribution. Bedrock doesn't require a traditional installation from scratch like most distros. Instead, you install Bedrock on top of a running Linux system, and it converts that system into the Bedrock base. This process preserves your existing installation but restructures it so that it becomes just one stratum among many. From there, you can add additional strata by fetching minimal root file systems from other distributions. Each added stratum lives in its own directory, isolated enough to avoid conflicts, but integrated enough to feel native. One of the most fascinating aspects of Bedrock Linux is how it handles command execution. Normally, when you type a command like ls, gcc, or Firefox, your shell looks for that binary in your path and runs it. In Bedrock, this process becomes more dynamic. Bedrock provides a command dispatcher that decides which stratum should handle a given command. This can be configured based on priority, availability, or explicit user choice. For example, you might configure your system so that core utilities come from a stable Debian stratum, development tools come from Arch, and specific applications come from Ubuntu. When you type a command, Bedrock transparently routes it to the appropriate stratum's binary, making it feel like everything is part of one cohesive system. Package management in Bedrock Linux is where things get especially interesting. Instead of forcing all software through a single package manager, Bedrock allows each stratum to use its native package manager. That means you can use Pacman for Arch packages, apt for Debian or Ubuntu packages, DNF for Fedora packages, and emerge for Gentoo packages, all on the same system. These package managers operate within their own strata, so they don't interfere with each other's databases or assumptions. At the same time, Bedrock's integration layer ensures that installed binaries and libraries are accessible system-wide where appropriate. This approach solves many long-standing frustrations for Linux users. Imagine you need a specific version of a compiler that's only available in Arch, but you rely on Debian's stability for your server environment. With Bedrock, you don't have to choose one over the other or resort to containers or virtual machines. You can install the Arch compiler in an Arch stratum and use it directly on your system while the rest of your environment remains Debian-based. Similarly, if you want the latest desktop environment features from Fedora but prefer Ubuntu's application ecosystem, Bedrock makes that combination possible. Another powerful concept in Bedrock Linux is the idea of selecting which stratum provides which components of the system. For example, the init system services, and low-level components can be provided by one stratum while user applications come from others. Bedrock is careful to ensure that critical components like the kernel and init system are handled in a consistent and safe way, since mixing these indiscriminately could easily lead to an unbootable system. By default, Bedrock relies on a primary stratum to provide essential system services, while other strata contribute userland tools and applications. Networking, graphics, audio, and hardware access in Bedrock Linux are designed to feel as normal as possible. Because all strata share the same kernel, they also share access to hardware devices. That means applications from different distributions can use the same GPU, sound card, network interfaces, and input devices without special configuration. Desktop environments, window managers, and graphical applications from different strata can run side by side, interacting through the same X11 or Wayland session. From the user's perspective, it feels like a single, unified desktop, even though under the hood, software is coming from multiple distributions. Security and isolation are important considerations in such a system, and Bedrock strikes a balance between integration and separation. Strata are isolated enough that their package managers and internal assumptions don't clash, but they are not as isolated as containers or virtual machines. This means applications can easily interact, share files, and communicate through standard Linux mechanisms. For users who need stronger isolation, Bedrock can still be combined with container technologies, but its primary goal is seamless integration rather than strict separation. Performance is another area where Bedrock Linux shines compared to alternatives like virtual machines. Because all strata run directly on the host kernel and share system resources, there is minimal overhead. Applications run at native speed, and there's no need to allocate memory or CPU resources to multiple virtualized environments. This makes Bedrock particularly attractive for developers, power users, and system administrators who want flexibility without sacrificing performance. The learning curve of Bedrock Linux is real, and it's important to be honest about that. Bedrock is not aimed at beginners who are just getting started with Linux. It assumes a solid understanding of Linux concepts like file systems, package management, system services, and command line tools. Managing multiple distributions on one system requires careful thought, especially when it comes to updates, dependencies, and compatibility. However, for users who enjoy understanding how their system works and want ultimate control, Bedrock can be incredibly rewarding. Updating a Bedrock system involves updating each stratum using its native tools. This means you might run apt update and apt upgrade for your Debian stratum, pacman-cu for your Arch stratum, and dnf upgrade for your Fedora stratum. While this might sound cumbersome, it also gives you precise control over what gets updated and when. You can choose to keep a stable stratum pinned to older versions while allowing another stratum to stay on the cutting edge. Bedrock's tooling helps manage this complexity by providing ways to list strata, enter their environments, and control command routing. One of the most common questions about Bedrock Linux is how it compares to containers like Docker or Podman. While there are similarities, the goals are different. Containers are designed for application isolation, reproducibility, and deployment. They bundle an application and its dependencies into a self-contained environment that can run anywhere. Bedrock, on the other hand, is designed for interactive day-to-day system use. It integrates multiple distributions into a single working environment rather than isolating them. You could think of Bedrock as bringing the flexibility of containers into the core of your operating system, without the overhead or separation that containers typically impose. Another comparison often made is with CRUD environments. Bedrock does use concepts similar to CRUD, but it goes far beyond that. Traditional CRUDs are limited, often awkward to manage, and not well integrated into the host system. Bedrock builds a cohesive framework around the idea of multiple root file systems, providing seamless command execution, shared resources, and unified configuration where it makes sense. This makes the experience far more polished and practical for everyday use. Use cases for Bedrock Linux are as diverse as the Linux community itself. Developers can benefit immensely by having access to multiple toolchains and libraries without juggling multiple machines or virtual environments. System administrators can combine stable server components with modern management tools. Power users and enthusiasts can build a truly customized system that reflects their preferences rather than the defaults of a single distribution. Even researchers and educators can use Bedrock to explore and compare different distributions in a hands-on way, all within one system. Of course, Bedrock Linux is not without its limitations. Not all distributions are equally compatible, and some assumptions made by certain distros can cause conflicts when integrated into a multi-stratum system. Debugging issues can be more complex because problems might arise from interactions between strata. Documentation and community support, while dedicated and helpful, are smaller compared to major distributions. Users need to be comfortable reading documentation, experimenting, and sometimes troubleshooting on their own. Despite these challenges, the elegance of Bedrock Linux lies in how it reimagines what a Linux system can be. It takes the diversity of the Linux ecosystem, often seen as fragmentation, and turns it into a strength. Instead of arguing about which distribution is best, Bedrock allows you to use them all, each for what it does best. It respects the philosophies of existing distributions while freeing the user from having to commit to just one. In a broader sense, Bedrock Linux represents the spirit of open-source experimentation. It questions long-held assumptions and offers a bold alternative, not by reinventing everything from scratch, but by creatively combining what already exists. It's a reminder that Linux is not just an operating system, but a platform for ideas, collaboration, and innovation. For those willing to invest the time and effort, Bedrock Linux can be a deeply satisfying way to experience the full richness of the Linux world. As you spend time with Bedrock Linux, you begin to see your system not as a static choice, but as an evolving environment. You can add new strata as your needs change, remove ones you no longer use, and fine-tune how everything fits together. Your system becomes less about the label of a distribution and more about the tools and workflows you care about. In that sense, Bedrock Linux doesn't just let you run multiple Linux distributions on one system. It lets you redefine what your Linux system is on your own terms.